All right. We thank everyone that's joined us so far in terms of this New Mexico ABA webinar. As you guys are aware, this is Dr. Richard that's presenting for us today, and I'll chat with, tell you a little bit about him here. But first of all, if you're joining and participating in lieu of, in hopes of getting some CEU credits for your BCBA credential, what I need you to do is type your name into the chat. Let me know that you're signed in. And then at the end, you'll also have to do the same thing. Sign your name to let me know that you're getting CEU credits as it's finished, okay? And then other pieces, just remember to keep yourself muted so that Dr. Mancil has the opportunity to speak to us. And typically how we do questions, you can type those into the chat box. I'll keep those and monitor them throughout the session. And then at the end, any of the questions we'll go ahead and have Dr. Mancil answer, and then we'll also ask questions through your through the microphones or whatnot. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll introduce Dr. Mancil. He is currently the director for the ABA Research Institute of Louisiana Tech University, and he's a doctoral level behavior analyst. He has a lot of experience. He earned his PhD from the University of Florida in 2007, where he gained clinical experience working with individuals with complex issues such as self-injury, rumination, sleep disorders, as well as severe communication issues. He has over 16 years experience working with individuals with autism spectrum disorders, cognitive disabilities, developmental disabilities, and psychiatric disorders. So prior to his current position, he was the executive director at the Kentucky Autism Training Center and an assistant professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning at the University of Louisville, as well as a private practitioner. In addition to those duties that he currently has directing the ABA Research Institute, he is an assistant professor, and he teaches ABA courses and autism courses, and he provides clinical services in the community. He has a long record of publishing and research, and we're glad to have him here and look forward to all this. Dr. Mancil.
All right. Do I need to screen share?
That's correct, Rich. Yep.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yep. Everything looks good. Is that in your presenter mode? If you put it in presenter mode, I think it'll kick out those slides to the left.
There we go. Okay, today we'll talk about what to expect from a behavior analytic company. And the agenda, one, so this is geared really towards parents and others, finding a provider, what to expect from a behavior analyst, what to expect from an RBT, data, why is it so important, and then a big chunk about going about how you improve the services that you deliver. So some of the terminology, a provider, for the parents out there, provider is an agency, sometimes it's a single board certified behavior analyst that provides ABA service to parents and the community. A board certified behavior analyst is an individual that has gone through coursework, has sat for the test, passed the test, and gained the clinical hours necessary to meet the minimum qualifications to practice in this field. Board certified assistant behavior analysts, they've also done coursework and they've met the clinical requirements to be an assistant behavior analyst. And the way most states work is those the BCABA must be supervised by a BCBA. A registered behavior technician is a relative new certification put out by the board to try to help standardize those direct line therapists that are working under behavior analysts to ensure that they meet the minimum qualifications, and what they do is actually implement the plans. So when you're looking for the provider, I always suggest the first thing you do is you want to interview the provider and interview the board, so the BCBA that's going to be working with your child. Now realize that us individuals who are board certified behavior analysts, we cannot give parent names of people we worked with and stuff like that, because we're not allowed to solicit recommendations and those kind of things from parents. We're prohibited by the ethical guidelines put out by the board to do that. But you can always suggest you can go to bacb.com if you're ever wondering, and you can go through and see if those individuals have ever had any complaints or things brought up against them. So some of the things you want to make sure you ask the behavior analyst prior to services to beginning is, one, how long have they been in behavior analysis? And when you're asking these things, you want to remember that same in any field, whether it's speech pathology, or whether it's medical doctors, when somebody becomes a BCBA, what that means is they meet the minimum qualifications to begin practicing as a behavior analyst. It doesn't mean that the individual knows everything there is in the world possible about behavior analysis and possible about working with every different type of disability and kiddo. So you want to ask those kind of questions. What is their experience treating individuals that have different ages of various disabilities? What types of challenging behaviors have they had to address? There's a huge difference between if all your experience had been dealt with basically non-compliance issues and tantruming type behaviors with really young children versus severe self-injurious behaviors with adolescents and older individuals. How you go about dealing with some of those things and some of the protocol that you have to have in place are going to be different for those. It requires a different level of expertise. Another thing, if severe issues do arise, is that BCBA going to be able, are they on call to speak? Are they going to be able to, are you as a parent going to be able to call them? Now this doesn't mean, you call them because your kid's refusing to eat Brussels sprouts or something like that. But if your kid all of a sudden starts banging their head on the concrete floor, or something really aggressive is going on, you're not exactly sure how to handle that, would they be available to call? Another thing is, are they members of any professional organizations? The Association of Professional Behavior Analysts, the Association of Behavior Analysis International. Do they regularly attend these trainings and conferences? We do have CUs as to maintain our certification. But you also want to know, do they actively present and talk? You can ask for a copy of their resume or CV. That's something I always provide to parents, because it's out the things that I have experience doing, what I'm comfortable doing, and working with the types of disabilities and the types of client issues. Now, some of the things like, what do you do if you have a problem? So what if you have a problem with your behavior analyst? I suggest, you schedule a meeting with that behavior analyst and have an open communication, have dialogue going on. So if you see something that they're doing and you don't like it, be frank and ask them, say, I don't like this, the way you're wanting me to respond to this behavior or the way you interact with my child. When I'm working with children in my RPTs that I train, one of the emphasis I have is, before I do anything, I explain in detail what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and if a new behavior comes up and I respond in a certain way, I'm sure that I tell the parent why I am maybe, in a way, and not looking at the child and giving them any eye contact while they're beating on my leg. So those type of things need to be explained. But first, go to that BCBA. It may just be a matter of miscommunication. Now, if they don't respond and they continue to engage and they're not open on why they do this, talk to their supervisor about those issues. if you have a problem with direct staff, you know, the registered behavior technician, the same things here. I would, you know, talk to that RBT about the issues that you're having. Now, unless it's something like abuse or something severe, and then you need to follow appropriate protocol for that. And then if that doesn't work, you know, you speak to your BCBA about that. So the things you're going to be able to expect from that BCBA, the first is an assessment. They're going to be the ones doing those functional behavior assessments, maybe VB-MAP, ABLES, other functional skills assessments, and other kind of analyses. And they are the individuals that are going to design the plans based off these comprehensive assessments. And one thing to remember when they're giving you the behavior plan and training you on that, as well as the staff, is it should be a red flag if you get a behavior plan and there's just reactive strategies with it. The emphasis here, and most behavior analysts push this, I run across, is emphasis is on skill acquisition, including prevention strategies. We can't just try to design reactive strategies without improving the skills. Now, the behavior analyst will train staff. So this is not merely just reading the plan to the staff. It's actually, you should see them reviewing plans with staff, but you should see them modeling to providing direct feedback, practicing procedures with the staff there, implementation with the client. Review data. The behavior should adjust the BSP, the behavior support plan, any treatment strategies that are being used based on the intervention, the child's response to the intervention. And they should review data with you on a regular basis. Now, they should supervise the staff, ensuring that data collection is implemented with treatment fidelity, and that it's regularly collected, and addressing parental concerns. You really need to have an open line of communication with your behavior analyst and with your RBT that's working directly with your kiddo. That way you can work to fix any concerns, any problems before they become major issues. A lot of times when I've worked with families, they don't say anything initially, but over time it becomes like dropping pieces of leaves on a stack until it becomes so heavy that they have a blow-up sort of episode that they get so upset with. There's been so many minor things that they've had problems with and concerns with. So it's best to just bring it out right away rather than wait. So what is an RBT and what do they do? An RBT is a registered behavior technician. And these are typically the individuals that implement the programming that's designed by the behavior analyst. So they implement plans, they work directly with the clients, and sometimes, depending on the level of the RBT, they may, as they're working with the client, they may provide some training to the parents directly, but under supervision of the behavior analyst. So an RBT does not conduct the assessments and they do not problem new issues alone. So what you need as a parent to be sure is be careful, like if something new is occurring, you can bring it up to the RBT, but realize they're not qualified to problem solve that and tell you exactly what you need to do at that very moment, unless it's something that's in the plan. So that's something you need to be aware of. If something major is concerned, you can let the RBT know, but they need to contact the behavior analyst to help problem solve that situation. Possibly the behavior analyst may need to come in, or they may not.
They are slamming into this incapable of taking on leaders and watches line your food.
What was that?
Ooh, the back and forth are pretty capable of
I think
potential.
someone has their microphone.
On this campaign.
Wait, can you tell who that is?
I'm guessing it wasn't a question, though. So why all this data? Sometimes I hear, well, why are you making me take data? Why do I need to do this? Well, without the data, we can't determine if something works. So if we don't have the adequate data, it prevents us from stopping things that continue, or we need that to be able to know whether or not to continue things that work and whether or not to stop things that do not work. Now, bearing in mind, it is crucial that parents take data because the behavior analysts, the RBTs cannot be there all the time. But at the same time, if data collection is designed and you look at that as a parent and there's no way in the world that you can possibly take that kind of data accurately, then you need to let the behavior analyst know. Because if it's not accurate, then you would have been better off not to have the data. So you need to work with your behavior analyst with them to design something that's feasible and reasonable for you to do. Because a lot of times, when I first started out, I designed these really great, intricate data collection systems, and then realized later when I go back to meet with the parent, they didn't collect the data because there was feasibly no way that they could do that with their young child with autism and two other little kids running around, and they were having to do everything in the house. They were not going to be able to take kind of detailed data. So as a behavior analyst, that's something you want to keep in mind. It's the same as working with the kiddo. We have to keep in mind the response effort, those levels required to keep that kind of data and have a balance. We want good data, but at the same time, we've got to make sure it's accurate. So it's got to be something that's going to be feasible for the parent to collect. So we use this data, we analyze it, we review it on a regular basis to determine to change the behavior plan, when is it time to fade out certain procedures so we can work, improve that maintenance and generalization. So all these things come into play. So now when we talk about improving services, some of the challenges organizational in this field, in any field that provides any kind of services to individuals with disabilities: burnout, turnover, maintaining levels of performance, job satisfaction, and treatment fidelity. Those are 5 of the big areas. So when I'm talking, you're going to hear I'm going to use performance management as far as individuals, their performance on the job, program evaluation, staff training, quality assurance, precision leadership. These are some of the terminology, the terms you're going to see being used. Now, behavior-based performance management is grounded in the science of ABA. There's a large body of empirical evidence to support its use. It's systematic, data-driven. It's been used for customer service, information management, safety, manufacturing, rehabilitation. Those are just some of the few areas. Most of what I've used it with has been working with facilities and using it with ABA companies and health organizations. I have stepped out a little and used it actually with the Air Force and helped design some safety protocol and reduce the number of accidents on a base near here. So the key things when you're doing this OBM is you want to complete a performance improvement analysis. So you're going to do an analysis of your organization, your staff. You're going about it the same way as you would if you're working with an individual with a disability. You have to do the assessment first. Now, some of the terms that you may read in performance management in the OBM literature is going to be a little different. The reason why it's a little different, Aubrey Daniels and others that kind of spearhead the field, they changed some of the terms to make it more palatable to businesses, because nobody wants you to come in and say you're going to write your plans for them and their staff. So you have to write performance plans. Same stuff, just different words. Again, we're being specific. We're measuring it, giving feedback. deliver positive consequences. So it's not just performance appraisal. It's not based on an organizational hierarchy of any kind. It's not a rigid system. And it's not, if it was common sense, people would be doing it. So it's not that. And it's not just a good job, a fuzzy pat on the back. It's not a 1-minute manager. You're designing a comprehensive system to improve whatever it is you're targeting. There are both short-term and long-term goals, but when you're implementing these, you should see some type of results pretty quick. You're going to, as far as, when I say PM requires no formal behavioral training, what I mean is I could go in and design a system and have managers implement and deliver these consequences in these rearranged environment. Those managers are not going to have to be behavior analysts. And that's what I mean by no formal behavioral training required. So you can look at all kinds of performance. It's not motivational tricks. Those don't last very long. Here, it's an open book management. It has to be transparent. You tell them exactly what you're going to do, and that's what you're going to do it for. For example, there's a residential facility here that was having, well, there's several things that we worked on. One was the nursing staff. There was a lot of overtime, mismanagement of things like that. So they were spending, $1 million a year on overtime pay, things like that. Another thing was that there were a lot of challenging behaviors in the facility, and as in a lot of facilities and classrooms included, one of the biggest issue was when I did the assessment was there was not very many activities going on at those periods of the day. There was a lot of downtime. So basically you had these individuals, adults with disabilities, they had nothing to do for 2-3 hours, so guess what? They found some things to do. And the other thing was the staff did not, their interaction styles, the way they interact with the residents and each other was not very positive. It was directive statements. Do this, don't do that. There was a lot of kind of things. So one thing we did was I designed basically it was a token economy system for the staff. So we selected 3 pinpoint behaviors that we wanted them to engage in. One was that during those down period times that they were actively involved with different types of games, board games, activities with the clients. Another was that they gave each other positive, specific praise. And we tied that actually to a Toodle board. I don't know if you guys have heard of those kind of things. So a Toodle board is where instead of saying bad things to each other, they would have to write something specific that they saw another staff engage in and put it on the Toodle board. So that also helps create a more positive work environment. So there were the 2 things that they received tokens for. They could exchange those tokens. They called them angel bucks at this facility. So they exchanged those for, they had a shop, a really nice shop on grounds that they sold really necklaces, all kind of really nice objects. So they could use that to buy items there. They could also use that to buy food at the cafeteria there. So that's what they were going to use that for. And it had a pretty good effect. The challenging behaviors decreased significantly. Now we did have to, one of the things I initially forgot to do was I needed to make sure that was for the first and second shift. What we realized is, and then we analyzed the data, third shift, we weren't seeing the improvements. So what we realized was, well, the shop was not open on third shift. So there was no really, okay, or earn the, I could buy something in a shop that's never open when I'm here. So we were able to set it up so that they could open that shop for 2 hours each day during third shift, so they could use it. Once we did that, after a week, their levels came up similar to the others. With the nursing staff, as far as decreasing the overtime, we actually set up a small group contingency plan for them to improve those services. And it was kind of strange. You wouldn't think adults would work for these type of things, but we surveyed them and asked them what they wanted to work for, and they actually wanted a pizza party. Yeah, that's what they want. We gave the pizza party after we fixed that, and they're continuing those group contingencies along the way with the nurse staff. At the front end, they spend a few $100 a month on those, maybe about $600-700 a month on the reinforcement for the staff that they're earning. But they've reduced overtime in the past year, and they've saved $600,000 from overtime reduction, also less challenging behavior, so they haven't had to call in the doctor, check things, they haven't had to take individuals to the emergency room. So in the end, it saves you a lot of money, because some facilities, they want to be like, yeah, this is all great, we want to improve people's lives, but in the end, you've got to be able to show them, sometimes how it ties back to money. So, we have those 4 behavioral consequences, the positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. So everything's going to get tied into these. And unfortunately, managers, even in us individuals as behavior analysts, running staff, we misjudge consequences that we deliver sometime. Like, what do you mean you're not getting a recognition? You got 2 gold stars in 1 week. So it's not just that you actually give the recognition or give some kind of what you think is a reinforcer. You have to do the job of identifying what effective reinforcers are for those individuals. Like, I would have never guessed that a pizza party would be what, 20 grown women would want to work for. But it was. So you've got to survey them and find out what it is they want to work for as far as those type of contingencies. And it doesn't always have to be those kind of things. What I embed with my staff a lot, I find out, I make sure I know about my staff's life, what type of things they like. I know things about family. One book that I read years ago and probably reread several times since, from the first course I took in ABA, my professor book said, read this book. It's How to Win and Influence People. It's an excellent book. You've got to make sure, when you're talking to your staff, when you're talking to others, you find out basically what makes them tick, what's reinforcing to them. People like for you to talk about them and the thing people they love, their children. So it goes a long way when you speak with them and, how did Jimmy do in his softball game or in his baseball game last night, those kind of things. And you can find little things that they like. Somebody might love coffee. Somebody might like going like milkshakes. One thing I do when I design group contingency plans is I buy tons of different gift cards to various restaurants. So that when I design any kind of contingency programming or token economy, I have those on. I can give them out. I will periodically even use non-contingent reinforcement, some of those type of things. So one of the things you've got to try is so that's the importance of identifying those reinforcers. And then you've got to make sure they're controllable. Like, are you going to be able to deliver those effectively? So, like if you're designing the token economy or anything like that, even though we're working with adults that work, we sometimes under this misconception that, oh, they're adults, they should just do their job because, they're getting paid. Well, yeah, we get paid, but that's not the biggest motivator always for people. the biggest reinforcer. They want to know that what they do is actually appreciated beyond a paycheck. Because, you know, when running businesses, we can't necessarily give everybody a raise every time they do something good. Now, the way a lot of times I've designed, like when I'm just running a single clinic, you can set up and do performance-based pay. So my clinicians, my RBTs that work under me, there's a base pay that they get. And then there's a top amount that they can earn. So, and those are based on their achievement of the pinpoint behaviors such as treatment integrity. They maintain a high treatment integrity, consistent open communication with parents, consistent open communication with me, so that let's say they start out, this is just the correct amount, let's say they start out at $12 an hour. If that's what they made the base pay, they could earn up to, say, it could be $16 an hour. And that's will be evaluated every 2 weeks. So then the next time will be on the next pay, that increase amount as far as performance pay. If you're going to do something like that, you've got to have a good book that's going to be able to manage that and track that kind of stuff as far as a business is concerned. So making sure that personalizing your reinforcers. And it's how you feel. So you're delivering this reinforcement. Don't say the agency or, we're giving you this. It's you. You've got to develop that rapport. One of the things I can tell you, and if you've attended any OBM workshops or anything like that, if you're doing an employee of the month thing, back and throw it out the window. That's probably one of the worst things you can do. It doesn't motivate staff. It doesn't ensure high levels of performance overall for staff. Because if you think about it, one person can be employee of the month. So out of everyone, one person earns some sort of reinforcement, supposedly. So you want to develop systems that everyone can earn reinforcement for doing high levels of performance. And in many cases, they have these weird constrained rules. All right, you can be employee of the month, but not every month. Or, you're a staff member of the year, but you can't be staff member every year. Or so-and-so, they haven't gotten it yet, so let's give it to them. It becomes that type of thing usually. And remember, when you're delivering the reinforcement, you tie it to the behavior. Because we don't reinforce people, reinforce behavior. So if somebody's not doing the performance, we don't deliver the reinforcer. The same thing as a lot of companies give bonuses at the end of the year. If you're going to give bonuses, you need to make sure they're tied to measurable behaviors. If you're giving bonuses because you're wanting to tie it to better performance and better outcomes. Otherwise, you're just giving it because you feel like you just want to give people money. So you've got to make sure it's tied to the performance data. And a lot of companies have that designed. Make sure it's sincerity. People know if it's fake. Don't overdo reinforcement either. Somebody did one small thing right, so you're not going to throw this huge party with a cake and, so match it to what they're engaging in. Reinforce frequently. That's what a lot of times I like to create these sort of token economies because it allows me to reinforce often with those, and then they can exchange that for other stuff. Unless I'm doing a group contingency, and then it'll be just one thing. Don't reinforce and punish at the same time. I remember early on in my career having supervisors that would use the sandwich method. They would sandwich a negative comment between two positives. Guess what? Majority of people, they're going to remember the negative thing you said. They're not going to remember the positive stuff. So what you want to do is reinforce what they did correctly, and then at another time, discuss what they did incorrectly and how to improve. And anytime you do address the negative stuff, make sure you say, yes, this is what you did wrong, but here's how to improve it, and here's how to do it better next time. Because the chances are a lot of times people know that you don't have to always tell people they did something wrong. If they're implementing a procedure and the child's not improving, or they start engaging in challenging behavior all of a sudden, they probably kind of sense that they did something wrong. So you want to make sure you tell them how to do it better the next time. So here, keep up the good work. Whatever it is, whoever you are. You guys have probably worked places where people were thought they were delivering reinforcement when they were doing these types of things. Make sure you're using a variety of reinforcers. A lot of the stuff is the same as the things you implement with children, the clients you work with. You just got to start thinking of your staff as your clients also. So you reinforce the behavior, you celebrate good results. So make sure, you want to make sure the contingency is what is producing the reinforcement. So the whatever behavior they engage in gets the reinforcer. So pinpointing. So you'll hear us say, instead of target behaviors or things like that, we'll call them pinpoint behaviors. So they have to be measurable, observable, and reliable, and under the performance control. So if you're going to give a pinpoint behavior, so for example, one thing here, I worked with one clinic, there were complaints that, they come to pick their kid up from the clinic or drop their kid off, in recognition, there wasn't any communication. They just grabbed the kid and walked back, or they just took the kid out and kind of dropped him off and didn't say anything. So we needed to ensure that there was more communication. Now that's something that's under the performance control. They can control whether or not they speak to the parents and how they speak to the parents. So I pinpointed, it was very specific. When you pick up the kid, the parent drops the child off to the clinic, you're going to say hello. There's some kind of statement, some hello greeting, some type of greeting. You ask them how the child's been doing since the last time they came. Was there anything you needed to know? So, and when they picked them up from the session, it was, there's a greeting again, but then you tell them what you worked on and how well, and was there a standout improvement or thing that you saw? Because what I was seeing and observing was when they did communicate, the only time they were communicating was the parent, oh, he engaged in all these challenging behaviors, having a bad day. Well, guess what? Well, that's why they're here, because they have all these challenging behaviors and typically have bad days, and parents know that. So once we implemented that, I had to make sure it was observable, so I need to be there to observe at different times. I couldn't be there all the time, every single time, but I made sure to do it randomly and made sure it was across all the ones they dropped, that they served, so that their technicians didn't know when I was going to observe. And that's another key when observing staff is, yes, sometimes but you need to do it often, more for shorter periods of time is what's best. So, you guys know this, the most basic measurements, counting. You got to make sure that pinpoint, it's something to observe, it's got to be something they can do. So if you're wanting to reinforce them engaging and implementing sessions within a day, if you're trying to get them to implement MANs and extending MANs out in play, you need to make sure they have the training and the ability to do this. It goes back to the same things you would with your clients with disabilities. If your staff doesn't know what to do or how to do it, it doesn't matter how much reinforcement you dangle out there, they're still not going to do it. So you need to make sure they have the skills and they have the tools to implement whatever it is you're asking. So for example, in the facility that I implemented the token economy, we wanted them to be more actively engaged. But what we found out is we had to redesign some staffing because they were setting out where they had one staff and 5 individuals, and they were getting sucked in having to deal with one too much, that there was no way possible for them to get those individuals actually engaged by themselves. So you got to make sure it's something that they can do also, and that the tools are there. So if you say you went in and you have safety protocols with the company, and there's certain safety things that they still have to do as far as cleaning equipment before running a new piece of wood through, then you got to make sure they have whatever tool it is that they would need to clean it. So here are some of the things you can measure with your staff: the accuracy that they deliver protocol, how often are they doing something. You know, I've seen some individuals, a lot of times, how many of you guys probably use like a Catalyst or Skills or some other program to keep your data, to collect data? A lot of people's doing that now. So, you know, I've gone into a lot of clinics and worked with a lot of individuals that they want to, all right, we want to, a pinpoint behavior is that they have to finish the plan. Like whatever's there, they have to make sure they run through that plan that day. So that they've done a certain number of discrete trials for the day. So like say they're working with a client for an hour and say, well, they should have at least 50 discrete trials that they ran. Problem with that is that's not focusing on a behavior, that's focusing on a result. The issue with focusing on a result like that is it can promote dishonesty. So I'm going to, if I don't get 50, I might get in trouble. If I get 50, I get some reinforcement. So what happens is they could just go through and click, and you start getting falsified data. And I've seen that happen. And we've had, you know, at places we had to dismiss people for doing falsified data. But at the same time, I had to get on to the behavior analyst for designing a system that, let's say you design the system to promote that kind of activity. So you would want to focus on, let's say you want them to run discrete trials, something better to have done was, all right, I need detailed notes on this particular part of the program, this particular part of the program. So you're going to be much less likely to get falsified data if they're having to give specifics. Otherwise, they'd have to go home and think up on things to have to make up. And they're less likely to spend that time. We have behavior lists that we can implement, point systems, and I've kind of talked about some of those, you know, with the token economy. Whenever you're designing, if you're going to design a token economy, especially if it's for a large group of technicians or a large facility, you need to make sure that there's some way to ensure that only the people that are supposed to give those out are giving them out. So that they can't, it's the same with any token economy system you design. You've got to make sure that they can't create some kind of fake token. So like at the facility I worked at, we had it where the supervisors that were giving the tokens out had to initial the back of those in a certain pin color. That way, if somebody turned in one and they had a photocopy of the signature, then we knew it wasn't correct. So feedback is information about performance. Just giving them information, data is not feedback. So when you provide, you sit down with your technicians, you go through the feedback in detail. Here's, you know, you had high treatment integrity during this session. Here's where it broke down, and here's what we need to do different. The thing is, feedback's pretty easy to deliver. It's free. It's pretty inexpensive to do. Not completely free. It's pretty inexpensive to do. But it's something you do on a consistent basis. And I like to do those things randomly. You know, a lot of companies, they have their annual performance evaluation. I think those things are okay, but should be based on those other performance feedbacks and sessions you're doing through the year. Not just, okay, we're going to sit down right now and say, oh, you can work this many days and so. You need to make sure it gets tied back to that performance, and that it's something, if you're going to give any kind of performance feedback, you need to make sure it's also designed to improve on whatever type of deficits they may have had. So here again, that immediate, making sure it focuses on improvement. I graph feedback if it's something that can be graphed. So when you're designing these things for your employees, a lot of facilities in places I've worked will set up, I have individuals will develop goals for them. What do you want to obtain? How do you want to become better within this field? A lot of times if possible, I don't really like hiring RBTs that have no desire to further their education in the field. Because if they have that desire, or if you can develop that, you're getting reinforcements and things in that you're not going to have to apply as much external reinforcers for. So you set these goals, like what do you want to be able to learn more about running naturalistic environment training, learn more on working with feeding disorders, working with food refusals, those things, and we'll set those targets up for them and develop a plan for them to be able to achieve them. And that will be part of the annual performance evaluation. And if you've ever been in higher ed, you have to do this. But it's usually not tied to any real behavior. You spend more time collecting documents than actually performing tasks. So is there a theme? So like I had angel bucks at this one facility, making sure there are variety of tangible reinforcers, of social reinforcers. And it doesn't have to be a formal affair. We're going into clinics, they set up there's nowhere for people to go hang out and grab coffee or anything like that. So you want to try to give them an enriched environment also. Is there a little break room? Is there coffee provided for them? I'll periodically bring in not just donuts, but donuts, fruit, when we've achieved, certain high-level outcomes all together.
Mitch, can I take a second real quick and interrupt you?
Yeah, that's fine.
I just want to give you a quick heads up that we're about 45 minutes in, and we want to try and leave about 10 minutes at the end. So I see roughly about 30 slides, so you got about 5 minutes.
All right, I'll go pretty quick.
All right, sounds good.
So running through these things is, I have often staff trainings and trying to get people to think as a radical behavior, from that approach. I build in with the reinforcement systems where they're going to, I have them do meetings. I have them write summaries of different trainings they do. Those type of things to help continuously increase their knowledge in the field. But they get reinforcement of some kind for actually doing those tasks. It's not you just go home and do this. I can't pay for them to sit at home and read an article, but if they give me a certain number of summaries of articles to show me what they've learned, or I tell them design a PowerPoint, come in and present that to others, they get some kind of, maybe it's a gift card, or I've gone in and taken their client for an hour and let them go out and take a break, those type of things. So those big areas, I want for each one to remember specifying works, providing staff some kind of checklist that they know what they're supposed to do, describing what they have to do. You model these skills, observe them do these work skills, provide feedback, and continue it. So I won't go through each one in detail, but you should have, I think what they should, we'll make the PowerPoints available so you can look at these in greater detail. And a lot of this in some of these slides I've already talked about. with these type of things. You know, here are some of the things you can measure. They're pretty easy to measure to see if they're implementing correctly. Here's just one example of a really quick checklist I've done. You know, I'll randomly go in and do 5-10-minute observations real quick with different line technicians. So, you know, there's the behavioral tactic they employed, the number of times I observed it, number of times it was correct, what their overall treatment integrity was for that particular observational setting. And I make sure to, when I do these, I do them randomly. So they never know when I'm going to pop in and do one of these type of things. And you can do these from a distance too. It's like, oh, pop in. You know, I've done it with Bluetooth and iPads and iPhones and observe from a distance. Typically when I use those, I make sure when you do those, if you're going to do those kind of things from your phone, make sure you have a HIPAA compliant program. VC is a capital V, capital S, lowercase e. That's a HIPAA compliant program. You can have it on any phone and any tablet. Just a quick little case example I'll try to run through. I think I'm probably explained some of this before as one of the examples talked about. We were focusing on increasing accuracy of behavior notes that they were submitting, because there was a lot of mentalistic terms and stuff like that they were using, and there was low levels of treatment integrity. So I created a group, we designed a group contingency to increase those. So we did it as a stepwise. So the first, you know, we wanted, by the end of the month, you need a 95% group treatment integrity across all technicians, and each technician had to have at least a 90%. And then also behavioral note accuracy had to be at that same level. So basically when I went through, read the behavior note, if there was one mentalistic term or something in there like that, it was recorded as a 0. So if they told me, you know, I don't want to know how you think he feels or how you feel, I just want the facts. So it has to be described in behavioral terms. Training beforehand on what those were like. They had multiple examples of what those looked like, and we had practiced it. So I'll run to the data. After implementing group contingency, you can see treatment integrity of just the feedback alone. It increased the integrity, but it didn't get up to 100 until I actually included the group contingency. And that was similar across each one of the clinicians. It was a small, it was 4 clinicians. And the behavioral note accuracy, it was a similar thing. The notes went up, but until, you know, I put the contingency in there, you know, it's like, oh, there's no contingency. You would think, at first, when I was running this piece, I really thought that there would have been more carryover here into the base when I withdrew that feedback. And then when I withdrew the feedback plus contingency, I really thought that this would still be up here some. But it was for one individual. This one is more of what I thought it would be like. That there's still some, but not completely. But that one individual, they're like, I'm not getting anything, so I'm not doing anything. I was really surprised at that. So with that little study I'd done, and then I implemented it. That was face-to-face, and then I've implemented that one, redid the study with a different group of individuals using telehealth, and got similar results. And I just submitted that, well, I submitted that to the Journal of Organizational Behavior Management. Apparently they forgot about it and I had to remind them. So now they're just now doing the review. So hopefully I'll hear back from them pretty soon. All right, I think I ran through those last slides there pretty quick. So,
Rich, that was phenomenal. I've never seen so many slides covered so fast. Thanks. So, Paul, I appreciate your sharing that information with us. So we'll open it up to questions. You guys are welcome to either chat in a, type in a question or unmute yourself and begin a question. Just give yourself a little bit of pause to make sure no one else is chatting at the same time for delays. But other than that, let's go ahead and field questions.
I have a quick question. Hi, Rich. I'm Carly.
Hey.
Work with Behavior Change Institute, BCBA. I was just wondering, when you provide, you were mentioning providing corrective feedback separate from positive feedback. And so let's say you supervise an RBT once a week for an hour and a half, 2 hours. How would you then, would you do corrective feedback one week and then positive the next, or how would you do that?
I would do the corrective feedback at that session at the time, and then deliver the reinforcement at another time.
Okay. Thank you.
Rich, I'll ask you a question. At the beginning, you talked about trying to understand the behavior analyst's training and experience, you know, the BCBA credentials, that minimum competency. And then you, through that, kind of went on to talk about a lot of like OBM or performance management type stuff. What's your take on a BCBA's ability, you know, coming out fresh from the university, having potential to have that kind of skill set versus what kind of things are you thinking they might need to do in addition, whether it's classwork or field experience, to really become a good performance manager to like oversee staff?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I really think they need to have some extra classes for OBM. And it's kind of an indoor. If they want to get that at a faster time period, then they need to have those. I think need to have those extra coursework, and then having a mentor that has done this for a while. Otherwise, you know, I think it's just going to take. I personally think that an individual needs to be outfield practicing as a behavior analyst several years they ever become, you know, running a company, so to speak. And that's not everybody agrees with me on that. But I often see people, you know, just get their certification and then open up shop and hire a bunch of people under them. And my experience has usually been that it's been not really great services has come out of that, because it's a different skill set. You know, typically in most programs, people don't get trained very well how to do those kind of OBM things. I hope that answered it.
Are there other questions from the larger group out there?
I have another question. I was just curious to know what the reinforcer surveys for your staff kind of look like. Is it a ranking type thing?
Yeah, some have been ranking type things and others have been open-ended. I'll be glad to send copies of the ones I used, so they can put it up wherever you guys put it up at, I guess, on the website.
Thank you. That'd be awesome.
If somebody would just email me to remind me to do that, though, or I'll get it once I leave here.
I have that noted, Rich. I'll send you that email. And then also, so everyone knows, all of those, anything related to this webinar will be posted on the New Mexico ABA website, which is nmaba.org. And then typically, I believe, and Joy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's listed under resources or events or something, a tab up at the top there. So easy access.
And also, yeah, I would suggest, if you're interested more in this, also read Aubrey Daniels' text, Performance Management.
Any other questions from our audience?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Earlier you had mentioned that you typically give a client a resume to show your credentials. Do you have a specific resume that you solely give to clients? Is it or your actual professional resume?
Well, it's an abbreviated
Okay.
resume that I give. So, I mean, I don't give them the whole 50 pages.
Right.
But I give them an abbreviated one and say, you know, I have one. I have a much longer one if you want it. But I also always a website that I put on there that I put all those kind of things on my website. They can download and look at the whole thing. They can see. You know, I'm always, anything like that, I'm a complete open book for parents. That way they know ahead of time, here's what I can do, here's the things I've done before. So, you know, that they, you know, just so they know.
And that's something you do for all clients right at the initial visit? Or?
Right at the initial visit.
Oh, okay.
That way, because I would rather them, you know, one weekend say, no, I don't, this is exactly what I want, versus I spent 3 months of my time trying to work with this kiddo and design things, and then they decide, oh, I read that you really haven't done a lot of this. Even though I may have told them, you know, that I haven't done this particular type of behavior issue before.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I feel like an auctioneer. Like, any more questions? Like, final call, or maybe it's the bartender saying final call for alcohol. My resume.
I was going to also just share that the CEU survey is in the chat box. So if you all can click on the link, you'll be able to complete the survey, and it will then send you to another link in order to submit your name and your credentials for your CEU.
Perfect. Thanks, Joy. And with that then, so I guess we'll conclude by thanking Dr. Mancil for his time and appreciate him providing this information to us. Again, the webinar and all related materials should be up within a couple of weeks or some time period, you know, close to that. Don't forget to sign out to indicate that you finished the webinar by putting your name in the chat box also. And other than that, we appreciate everything that you guys do for us. Thank you for your time, Dr. Mancil.
Oh, thank you. And hope to, if anybody's going to be, I'll be at the, on April 2nd at the Autism Society thing up there in Albuquerque. If any of you guys are going to be there, hopefully I'll see you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.